Well, hello, virtual conventioneers and Steiff lovers alike. And I'm sure there's enormous overlap between the two groups. I'm delighted to be with you here today to present to you all about Steiff's Jocko monkeys. These are an utterly fabulous legacy Steiff design that transcends both the pre- and post-war periods, and everybody seems to love them. And since we're all in the mood for a little fun, there's nothing more fun than a barrel full of monkeys, so I thought we'd present the history of Jocko to you today. And just to kick things off in the biggest way possible, I'm sharing with you the largest Jocko ever made. This beautiful boy is a studio size, and as you can see, he's as big or bigger than I am. And he is my best friend next to my husband, Steiffgal. Now what I'm going to do is going to mosey over here, where you can see we have a large contingency of Steiff Jockos, which I'd like to share with you. And there's just so many nice faces here. You can see why some people just collect Jockos, because they're so beautiful in their own way. But let me give you a little history of this wonderful design. So this wonderful design debuted in 1909. Now Steiff had been making monkeys in its line since the debut catalog of 1892, but they were a little bit more primitive, no pun intended, in design. So in 1909, Steiff patented a monkey design, and it specifically called out the way the eyes were inlaid into the felt and some special features about it. And that little monkey turned out to be none other than these Jockos. And these wonderful Jockos have a lot of terrific characteristics that have not changed over time. You can see here's a very pretty one, and you can see specifically, in all but the smallest sizes, the eyes are inlaid in eye pockets, and a wonderful mohair beard, and wonderful, very adorable proportions. And one thing you have to notice about Steiff Jockos, and it's one of the things I'm asked about all the time when identifying monkeys, is no Jocko has a tail. Look, nothing there. Steiff Jockos do not have tails. Other Steiff monkeys do, but these Jockos do not. So, let me show you some very early Jockos and move through the line. I've got some sort of very early Jockos, some transitional ones, and some very interesting ones made during difficult times with transitional fabrics, early post-war, and then post-war, and I have novelties to share for you. And what you're going to see is over time, the design doesn't change all that much, but it just changes enough that you can sort of detect an old-fashioned property in the pre-war ones, and I'll try to show you some of the things to look out on that. And I'm going to show you some wonderful colors. The standard line Jockos were brown, which did debut in 1909. A white Jocko came out in 1925 because there was a very important piece of literature came out about a white monkey. So Steiff said, oh, everybody's talking about a white monkey, we'll make a white monkey too. So Steiff made the white monkeys too. And over time, these little monkeys have been made in anything from about 10 centimeters to, you see the big Jocko there, he's as big as I am, the average size being what collectors are collecting is what I'm surrounded with. Anyway, let's go through some really interesting and fun Jockos, maybe some that you haven't seen before. These little guys are the babies. These are pre-war Steiff Jockos. You see how cute they are? And they are fully jointed with little eyes. They don't have the white mohair beard because it probably wouldn't fit on them, and they're too young for beards anyway. But they're delightful little babies in a lovely light chocolate brown color. One of my more unusual Jockos from the pre-war period is this funny orange color. And this is not an orangutan, and it's not another type of monkey. It is a Jocko. And this delightful sort of orangey apricot color is just so eye-catching and lovely and very authentic to Jocko. So if you see one in this color, it's very rare, but it is a Jocko. You see his wonderful hands and felt features. He's lovely. A little button in his ear. Isn't he adorable? Irresistible. Yummy. Here's the white Jocko I had mentioned. So this little fellow did come out around 1925. And if you noticed something very interesting about the white Jockos is that they have green eyes in the eye pockets. And if you notice, they're called slit pupil eyes. So instead of round pupils, like the regular Jockos have, these have slit pupils, are the ones that I have the slit pupil eyes. And one of the things about the white ones you notice is the gorgeous airbrushing. See the beautiful, dramatic airbrushing on the face. It is more dramatic than on a darker version, and I don't know if that's because of the style or the contrast, but these often have these delightful, wonderful contrast. Everybody play nice together. Okay. And this is kind of a little oddball Jocko. I got him a couple of years ago. He doesn't have the typical shape or construction. He's very chunky. And he's made out of, oh, it's very dark chocolate brown mohair. Much, much darker and much shorter than most Jockos. I don't know the story behind him. He has this pre-war button. He's a chunky little fellow with funny seams and such, but a delightful face. And it's not unusual because these were made for so many years and on so many sizes that you might find an unusual one again in a different color or shape or dimension, but they are Jockos, and still no tail. Let's now move on to a time that was very interesting in terms of toy production, and that is in the 30s and 40s, and this is just before and just touching World War II. And what was happening at Steiff, because of its location and proximity to natural resources or not, is that the factory did not have a lot of access to traditional toy making materials like mohair and felt. So what they did is they produced standard line items in unusual fabrics, even more so than in the past. This is a delightful fellow who I got at this Festival of Steiff a couple of years ago, and he is made out of wool plush. And you can tell it's wool plush because it doesn't feel like mohair, which feels like a little bit like a hooked rug or something like that. This is a much more continuous feel. It's a little softer and such. You can still see clearly the Jocko features in the legs and the hands and such. This little fellow, I bought him, and I was coming home from Germany, and I was coming through the Heathrow airport, and I had not given him a name yet, and I like to give most of my treats a name. And I was thinking, what shall I call him? And I was traveling with some friends, and it was very late. I'd say it was midnight as our plane arrived at Heathrow, and we were walking through the almost empty airport, and out of one of the bank exchanges, a very tall, maybe 7-foot tall, very handsome, exotic man with a turban and a beautiful accent walked out, and someone yelled out, "Good night, Cha-Cha," and he yelled out, "Good night to you as well, and to all of you." And he was so extraordinary, and he caught my eye so much, I thought, well, you're not 7 feet tall, but you're certainly distinctive, and you're certainly handsome, so we will call you Cha-Cha in honor of that wonderful man and that wonderful experience. So that is Cha-Cha out of wool plush. He is the most interesting name story. And this delightful fellow is made out of artificial silk plush, and you would also see this just before or just after World War II. Minimal felt use, but this material, like the wool plush, artificial silk plush, is sort of a transitional or wartime material. And it didn't wear as nicely. You can see he's not as sturdy or shiny or any of those things that mohair allows items to project, but he still has a delightful personality, a wonderful face, a little bit lighter in color, and that's probably because that was the material that was available. So what you're seeing here are 30s and 40s Steiff Jockos. Aren't they beautiful, nonetheless? So, when things were back up and running at Steiff, the company produced their Jockos in pretty much the same pattern as pre-war. And see, he's got his wonderful expression. This one looks a little surprised. He's delighted to see you. He's surprised to see so many of you in our living room. That's his look of happiness. And what you can see here is his U.S. zone tag, which implies he was produced in the late 40s or early 50s at Steiff. And he's got a lovely face. And here's another little fellow from the same time period, and his button is blank, which tells you exactly he was made in the late 40s or early 50s, so he is one of Steiff's earliest post-war productions. And you can see these lovely fellows, just charming, and they're from the late 40s or early 50s. Just beautiful, happy faces. So this size, closed mouth, open mouth, just based on their size. And finally, things are up and running with Steiff, and these are items that were made. You're special, you go here. These were items that were made in the 50s and 60s and onward. And I pulled this one out because I wanted you to see one of the characteristics of Steiff's brown mohair is that I don't really know the conditions that cause this, whether it's humidity or temperature or whatever. You can see that this started out this color, but it is not unusual for Steiff's brown to turn sort of this delightful caramely color, or even tipped, silvery tipped. That's not weird or fake or anything, that's just what happens with brown mohair sometimes over time. And these guys did start out the same color. And, of course, little fellows from the same time. And Steiff was still making the white monkeys after the war, but in fewer sizes and such. But these little guys are great. These little guys are wonderful in the arms of dolls, especially little boy dolls, you know, making mischief and such. So that is sort of, in a nutshell, a little history of the Steiff line from the beginning to the 50s and 60s and such. One of the things that's super cool about Jocko is that he's so playful and he looks great as an accessory. I think that's because they're rather human-like and they're playful and they can move and perform very in an entertaining way. So Steiff has produced a number of novelties involving Jocko that I'd like to share with you. I'll start sort of with a Jocko. Obviously this is not a Jocko, but Jocko was invented in 1909. He received his name in 1929, but when he was introduced in the early 1910s, he was produced also as a tumbler. Now this guy, I know we've talked about tumblers in the past, this is obviously a teddy, but imagine Jocko in this form was also produced this way, or the chimpanzee, with these very long arms placed low on the body, and he would tumble. So that tumbler was around in the early 1910s. That's just a cousin. Okay. Another fabulous design, which came out in 1912, is called record Jocko. And record, meaning that it's on a cart with 4 wheels and such. And when this turns, oops, you see he pops. So imagine me pulling this on the ground, and he goes up and down. So these Jockos were produced starting in 1912. And I think Steiff got the idea for this because in 1912 it was a very popular circus act for monkeys to ride around on bicycles and little carts. And I think people found that very entertaining, so Steiff said, well, we can do that with our little fellows too. So it probably has some grounding in history, the reason Steiff came out with what they called the record Peter or the record Jocko. And these were produced, I think, through the 60s. They're very, very popular and still are. They're totally adorable to exhibit as part of a toy collection. And they came in a number of sizes. This one's kind of extraordinary because it's the smaller pre-war size. These came in a number of sizes pre-war, I think 3 sizes. I believe this is the middle size. You can see it's the smaller Jocko. This one is a wonderful cinnamon color, very unusual. Sort of like the apricot looking one, but this is definitely cinnamon with its lovely dark mohair. And he also, he's going to show off for you, he also is in shape. Look at that. Not bad for like 100 years old, huh? He's still working it. Isn't that adorable? So we have these wonderful record Jockos. I'll put those here for a second. And they have a very old cousin who's just precious. He also was made in felt. And if you notice, he's in his little red outfit, which is integral to his body. What I love about him, and he still has it, which is awesome, he has a little fez. Isn't that adorable? And that goes on him. And yes, this is a little Jocko, no tail. And he also, go Jocko, go. Isn't that fabulous? Oops. All right, good job. And that is also from the first quarter of last century. Beautiful. I know you're not surprised to learn that Jocko was produced as a hand puppet, both pre- and post-war. Very playful, obviously perfect for a hand puppet. Monkeys are very playful and happy and interactive, and this is a perfect example of a Jocko, name, chest tag, and his button and ear. And this fellow has a very early number, putting him probably around 1950 to 1952 of production. Very early. Very sweet. See, it's more fun than a barrel of monkeys. Very interesting fact, the Steiff brothers, the Steiff nephews, were the first people in Gingen to have a car, an automobile, and they were fascinated by it. And what they did is they merged their love of creating toys and their love of their automobiles to create automobile toys, believe it or not. This is a replica. If this was real, I'd have him behind glass and I'd be wearing white gloves. But Steiff did produce a motor chimpanzee to decorate your car with, and you can see he's got his chauffeur hat. Clearly this is a replica, but this was produced in the early 19-teens when the Steiff nephews had their cars and were decorating them with dolls and all sorts of fun toys and drivers and such. That's your motor chimpanzee. This is a really interesting item that features a teeny tiny Jocko who's seen better days, but that's okay because this is pretty rare. This is called a roly-droly, and when you pull this along, the yellow discs rotate in a circle. So it's like rolling and rolling, which is sort of German for moving along and funny in a happy way. And so Steiff would decorate some of their toys, this is from the late 1920s, it was only in the line for a few years, with little chimpanzees in white or in brown and such, and he'd ride with a circus bear. So that's Jocko as a passenger on a roly-droly. And I'm going to end on a very happy note. I hope you feel like singing. Here we have a delightful early post-war Jocko. Now, what's interesting about him, he's sort of like, do I have another one like you here? You can see he's very similar, and these two are best friends, but he has a big red spot on his belly, and that's not a patch. What that is, oh, he's working for you. Can you hear that? He's a pressed music box, which is a throwback to the Steiff's music production in the late 1920s and early 1930s. But this would say music on it in white. And so that's a very unusual Jocko. And what you might want to do, if you find an older Jocko who looks like he might have had something on his belly, give it a squeeze. You know, he'd probably like that. I like that. And see if he makes music. But you see his similar body construction and such, just feels a little heavier, and the same facial construction and such as this Jocko. So on that happy note and happy tune, all of my Jockos, my big ones to my small ones, and all these folks here, hope that they have brought a little sunshine to your day, and hope you've enjoyed our talk about Jocko at the Virtual Dog Convention. Thank you so much for your time, and as always, Teddy hugs.